Today I'm going to be taking a look at an ambitious little handheld made by KinHank. KinHank has been in the emulation space for quite some time. They have a couple of set-top box emulation consoles, but I think what they're most known for are their emulation hard drives. I actually reviewed one of their hard drives a little while back. It was a 12 terabyte, and I have to say the thing was pretty damn impressive. It had a really good collection of games, and the performance all around was pretty solid. But now that they're venturing into the handheld retro emulation space, how well will they actually perform? Let's take a closer look. Inside the box, you have the K36 handheld itself. You have a USB Type-C cable for charging and data transfer. You have a micro SD card to USB adapter, and a basic set of instructions. Under the hood, the specs more closely resemble something we would have seen out of one of these handhelds a couple of years ago, so unfortunately that makes it a tad bit dated right out of the box. Looking at the handheld itself, it has that very familiar vertical Game Boy-esque kind of aesthetic going. You got 4 face buttons, a directional pad, a start and select button, an FN button over at the top, as well as 2 analog sticks. Flipping it over, and the first thing that stands out to you is the fact that this thing is caked up. It's got these 2 little hand grips that really make it resemble a baddie in some leggings. This is ridiculous. It also has these 4 shoulder buttons. They're in the side-by-side style, which I really dislike, and I'm hoping that these companies will start steering away from this in the future. But they feel real solid and are nice and clicky. On the one side, you have the power button, a reset button, and the SD card slot for the operating system. On the other side, you have your volume control. Top side, you have the 3.5mm headphone jack, 1 USB-C port that's used for OTG, and the other one for the power supply. And on the bottom is where you'll find the speaker. The handheld is on the smaller side, but the grips in the back make it much more comfortable to hold than what it should be. The buttons are fair, a tad bit mushy, but I know there are some people out there that prefer that style. The D-pad feels really great. I really like the size and is overall comfortable. The analog sticks have that almost Joy-Con look to them, but they're allegedly Hall effect. And if that's the case, that's a huge positive because stick drift really shouldn't be an issue and dead zone should be a bare minimum. Powering the handheld up, the user interface is really clean and organized. I know it's running a version of EMU Elect, which has always been a really solid emulation operating system. The first thing I noticed is that there are no Nintendo games on here. The only thing remotely close to a Nintendo game are these Pokemon mini games. Now, I understand why a company wouldn't want to step on Nintendo's toes, but a lot of people buy these things to replay some of their childhood Nintendo favorites. I'm not saying this is completely a deal breaker, but it's definitely something to consider if you're considering buying this one. Hey guys, post-production Ness here. So it turns out that they excluded Nintendo games for the exact reason why I assumed. They don't want to step on Nintendo's toes. However, they do have a Discord chat with a fairly decent community that all help each other acquire and install the retro games that they want. I know it's kind of a tedious extra step, but I totally understand why they did it. And now back to the review. Based on its specs, I expect it to handle up to 32-bit game consoles relatively easily, but anything past that, I think it's gonna struggle. So let's dive right into PSP. The games that are on this handheld are a mixed bag. Some of the less resource demanding ones are gonna run pretty well, but the ceiling is pretty low, and a lot of these other games just will not have consistent performance. So while it's capable of playing certain PSP games, it is far from the best PSP retro emulation handheld. Dreamcast and Sega Naomi ran much better, but you can tell the graphical settings were set to pretty low in order to get this level of performance. Combined, there's just a little over 10 Dreamcast and Naomi titles, which is a little disappointing, but once again, buying a handheld like this with these specs, you're not specifically buying it to play Dreamcast on. It has about 12 Sega Saturn games on here, and the performance ranges from really decent to playable. I would have really liked to seen more Saturn games on here, but once again, given its specs and given the price point, I'm really not surprised. The PS1 library was much better and all of the games actually ran pretty good. There are some noticeable AAA games missing from its library, but there's enough substance there to work with. And I feel where this handheld is probably at its strongest is with its arcade collection, specifically CPS1, CPS2, and CPS3. It makes for a great little retro arcade pocket machine. So the K36 by KinHank. Guys, I'm gonna be completely honest. This handheld feels like something that should have came out 3 to 4 years ago. Performance-wise, it's a pretty big step back from some of the other entry-level handhelds we're seeing on the market currently. And the fact that it doesn't have any Nintendo games bundled in really doesn't help its case. However, with that being said, you really can't argue with the price that you can find this handheld at. The K36 is as budget can get. And if you already have a pretty vast ROM set, adding extra games on here won't be terribly difficult for you. In that case, this thing is worth every penny. It's honestly pretty disappointing considering KinHank is a company that's known for their massive ROM sets to see that that wasn't applied here. So based on the fact that this is a super affordable handheld, I can't really call it bad. So instead, I'll refer to it as dated. It's a dated piece of tech at a really good price. If you're on the market for an entry-level emulation handheld, I'd say you're probably better off forking over the extra $20 to $30 and getting something with better performance. But if you're on a super tight budget and you just want to enjoy some retro games, this one might be worth taking a look at. If you guys are interested in the K36, I'll put links in the description below. Until next time, this is Ness, signing out.